It's story time. It's story time. It's time to hear a story. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever played the game that's called Gossip or Telephone, but you get a group of people. You need at least 4 to 5, but the more the better. And you get in a line, and one at the beginning of the line whispers something in the person's ear next to them. And then that person whispers it to the next person and the next person and the next person, all the way to the last person. And then the last person tells what they heard. And 9 times out of 10, it is not what the first person said. And that's the way it is with stories. They've been told for hundreds and hundreds of years by many, many different people. So each telling is a little different, and sometimes quite a bit different. And this is how I learned how Ananse bought the Sky God's stories. Now it is said that in the beginnings of time, so long ago, I wasn't there, or I wouldn't be here now to tell you this story. But in those long, long times ago, no one had any stories because they were owned by Nyankompon, the sky god. Now, many people tried to buy the sky god's stories, but no one had succeeded. So one day, Ananse, the smartest spider in the world, decided that he was going to go and buy the sky god's stories. So he wove a very, very strong web ladder straight up to the heavens, and he went before the sky god and said, Nyankompon, I want to buy your stories. What is the price? And Nyankompon smiled to himself, thinking, how does this little spider think he can buy my stories? But I'll give him a chance. So Nyankompon said, the price of my stories is Onini the python, Mboro the hornets, Osibo the leopard, and Mimosia the fairy. So Ananse climbed back down his spider ladder and left it, and went to his wife Aso, who was very, very smart, and he told her what he needed. So to get Onini the python, Aso said, you should go and find the longest palm branch and cut it, and I'm going to find a long string creeper. So they both did that, and when Ananse had his long palm branch and Aso had the long string creeper, they walked out into the forest to where they knew they could find Onini the python resting in the sun. And sure enough, they did see him. And as they approached, Aso said, oh no, this palm branch is longer than he is. And Ananse said, oh no, nothing is longer than Onini the python. And when Onini heard his name, he lifted up his head and he said, I heard somebody mention my name. Are you talking about me? And Ananse said, my wife also says that this palm branch is longer than you. Oh no, nothing is longer than me. I am the longest creature in the forest. "Well," said Aso, "why don't you stretch out next to this palm branch and we'll see who's the longest." And so Anini slithered over to that palm branch and stretched all the way out beside it. And he was indeed a little bit longer, but before he could know what was happening, Aso and Ananse wrapped him up with that string creeper right on that palm branch. And then Ananse said, "Fool, I've got you now, and I'm taking you in exchange for the sky god's stories." And he dragged that palm branch with Onini through the forest and up his spider ladder and presented it to Nyankampon. And Nyankampon put his hand on it and said, "My hand has touched it. What remains still remains." So next were the hornets. When Ananse got home, Aso handed him a calabash filled with water, and he went and found a long palm leaf, and he went out to the tree where the hornets hung out. Now, the one thing the hornets hated was water. Now, the hornets are very small and their brains aren't too big. So Ananse put that branch over his head, and with his other hand he poured that calabash of water over his head until it was empty. And as it was pouring it, though, he said, "Hornets, hornets, it's raining, raining. Come and get into my calabash so you don't get wet." Well, those silly hornets flew right into the calabash. And Ananse quickly put that palm leaf on top of it, and he tied it up. And he said, "Fools, I've got you now, and I'm taking you to the sky god in exchange for his stories." And he quickly went back up his ladder with that calabash and presented it to Nyankampon. And the sky god put his hand on it and said, "My hand has touched it. What remains still remains." Now what remained was the really hard one, Osibo the leopard. So Nancy went home and also handed him a shovel, and she said, "Go and dig a big, deep pit." And Ananse knew immediately what she meant, because the leopard every evening went along the same path. So Ananse went out and spent that whole afternoon digging the deepest pit he could. And when he was finished, he and Aso helped him cover that pit up with leaves and grasses and branches, so no one could tell that there was a deep, deep hole beneath it. And so Ananse and Aso went home and had a very good night's sleep. But as usual, Osibo was walking through the forest down his path looking for something to eat. And without any warning, he made a step, and all of a sudden he went down and landed at the bottom of that pit. And he looked up, and there was no way he could get up that straight wall. So he just snuggled up into a corner and fell asleep. Well, the next morning, Ananse got up bright and early and went walking down that path, humming. And of course, Osibo heard him, and he said, "Help! Help! Help! Please help me get out of here." And Ananse walked over to the edge of the pit and looked down and said, "Why, Osibo, what happened?" And Osibo said, "Some hunters must have dug this pit, and they'll be coming soon to get me. Please, Ananse, please help me get out of here. Find a string creeper, let me climb up." And Ananse said, "Why should I help you? If I help you when you get out, you'll eat me up." "Oh, Ananse, I don't eat spiders. You don't have enough meat." "Yes, but I know you're hungry and I've heard you can't be trusted." "Oh, please, Ananse, I promise I won't eat you or any of your relatives ever. Please let me up." Okay. So Ananse went back and took his time looking for the string creeper he had hidden behind a tree. And Aso came out with him, and she had a rock in her hand, and she walked behind him and stayed behind him. Ananse threw the string creeper over, and Osibo climbed up it. But just as he got his top paws over the edge, Aso hit him in the head with the rock. And of course, he was unconscious. And Ananse and Aso quickly grabbed him up and tied up all his paws and tied up his mouth. And just as he was coming awake, Ananse said, "Fool, I've got you, and I'm taking you in exchange for the sky god's stories." And he took him straight on up. It took quite a while because Osibo was very heavy. But he got him there and put him before Nyankampone. And Nyankampone put his hand on him and said, "My hand has touched it. What remains still remains." Now all that was left was the fairy. And that wasn't going to be too hard. Aso had made an Akuba doll with a neck that could bend up and down. And she had pounded some sweet, sweet yams. And Ananse went out to the sticky sap tree and got some sticky, 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 sticky sap and put it all on that doll and put a string around her neck. And then he took the pounded yams and walked out into the forest and set the doll up against the tree, which was the favorite tree that the fairies would come and hang out at. And he climbed the tree with the string around the doll's neck and waited. And sure enough, he didn't have to wait long because those fairies loved sweet pounded yams and they could smell it for miles. And two came and they saw the doll and they said, "May we have some of your sweet pounded yam?" And Ananse made the doll's head go up and down. And those fairies ate those pounded yams so quickly. And then when they were finished, one of the fairies said, "Thank you." But of course, the doll didn't say anything. And the fairy was upset. "I said, thank you." But again, the doll didn't say anything. "Don't you have any manners? I said, thank you." Of course, the doll didn't say anything. "If you don't say you're welcome, I'm going to smack you in your smacking place." Of course, the doll didn't say anything. And that fairy hit her on her face And then she tried to take her hand away, and it stuck. Let me go, or I'll smack you again. And she smacked her again, and she was stuck. But this fairy wasn't very smart. Now, her friend fairy was smart, and she knew something wasn't right, and she flew away. Well, that fairy was so angry, she said, let me go, or I'll kick you. And she kicked the fairy and doll and got stuck. And she kicked the doll again and got stuck. And finally, she was so angry, she punched her head in the middle of the doll's stomach. And there she was, stuck to that doll in 5 places. So, Ananse climbed down and he said, Fool, I've got you now, and I'm taking you in exchange for the Sky God's stories. And very quickly and easily, he took that doll straight up to the Sky God, stopping on the way to pick up Aso. And he presented that doll to Nyankampon, and Nyankampon said, My hand has touched it. And then he ordered for all the gods and goddesses and kings and princes and dancers and drummers to come up and prepare for a great celebration. And they all gathered. And they danced and partied and drank palm wine. And finally, Nyankampon called everybody to attention. And he said, Many kings and princes and warriors and scholars have tried to get the Sky God's stories, but only Ananse, the smartest spider in the world, was able to bring me Onini the python, Mboro the hornets, Mimosia the fairy, and Osibo the leopard. So from this time on, all stories are to be known as spider stories. And so it is that we have many, many, many spider stories. And Ananse features in a lot of those stories. Now, this is a story that comes to us from West Africa. And that is how I heard that Ananse bought the Sky God's stories.